Xian is dying in a world where weakness is lethal. He's just another victim getting crushed under the weight of a world that demands everything from the helpless. A creature of pure nightmare just swallowed a vehicle whole, and now Xian is paying the price for his lack of strength. The Scorched Desert Sand Mage. A century ago, a beam of light descended from the sky and changed everything forever. That light did not just touch down, it began to systematically erase every living thing on the entire planet, and the blue world we knew vanished. Everything was reduced to a parched and desolate sphere floating through the darkness of space. The tiny fraction of humanity that actually survived had no choice but to retreat behind fortress walls. Xian sits on a transport bus bound for a mine, wondering why the world did not just finish the job. A heavy hand slams into his face and pins him against the cold metal. The guy pulling this move just grins and pretends it was a complete accident. This massive thug keeps laughing while he demands a name for his mock apology. He stares straight up at the guy and tells him that his name is Xian. The brute just laughs harder and starts throwing insults about his family background instead. Xian keeps his cool, but that only gives the guy more room to keep poking him. Everyone here shares one trait. The guy keeps leaning in way too close and tries to force a fake friendship. None of them are minors. Every single person on this bus is a criminal or a fugitive hiding from justice. Xian is not just talking anymore as he drops a heavy right hook on the guy. The violence escalates instantly while the rest of the passengers watch the chaos unfold. He stands his ground in the aisle and decides it is time to drop the truth. He finally admits the real reason he is on the run because he committed murder. In this city, killing a regular person barely counts as a crime anyway. He tells them the victim was just a thief who got what was coming to him. The dying guy drops a name that changes everything because he's related to Li Jiryong. Xian realizes he just signed his own death warrant by crossing someone that powerful. In this world, the awakened are treated like living gods compared to everyone else. He knows he's completely screwed for messing with someone far above his weight class. He spent his final resources fleeing to this bus just to escape the inevitable manhunt. And then someone calls out his name. He looks up to see his worst nightmare standing right there in the flesh. The newcomer signals for a fight and asks if he is finished with his excuses. Xian realizes his own defense failed and he is already bleeding from the initial impact. He is sent flying across the bus before he even has a chance to react. The sheer force of the blow leaves him crumpled on the floor in total shock. The bully mocks him for crossing the line and claims he would have been merciful. Xian can barely process that he managed to find the one person he was running from. The rest of the bus realizes they are dealing with an awakened and he is finished. Passengers scramble as the vehicle suddenly lurches and screams echo through the cabin. The bus flips into the air as an unseen force tears it from the ground. A passenger blames the driver for the accident while the vehicle is ripped apart. The driver ignores the panic and calmly grips the wheel while the bus is shredded. Horror sets in as the passenger finally stares directly at the cause of their destruction. A massive sandworm swallows the entire vehicle whole in a swirling vortex of sand. The passengers are crushed together as the vehicle is pulled deeper into the beast. Death here follows a predictable and recurring cycle. A survivor reaches out from the shifting dunes as the vehicle vanishes beneath him. The world operates on the simple logic that the strong will always consume the weak. He stares into the darkness and finally accepts that his life is reaching its end. He blames his own weakness for his inevitable death in the jaws of the worm. He mocks his own fantasies about being strong enough to survive this cliché nightmare. Any further thoughts are just pointless rambling now. A single hand remains frozen in the sand as all signs of life finally vanish. But the hand does not stop moving, clawing its way back toward the surface. The desert tries to pull him under, but he fights the shifting weight. A sudden flash of golden light erupts from deep within his own eye. Xian breaks through the crust, gasping for the air he was denied moments ago. Every breath is a struggle as he drags his body from the suffocating earth. Beneath his skin, a pulsing network of energy starts to rewrite his internal anatomy. Everything around him begins to pulse with a rhythm he is only now sensing. Cosmic star-like energy reflects deep within his pupil, anchoring him to something greater. Golden sand swirls around his body as he taps into an raw, radiating power. A violent beam of light crashes down, shattering the stone buried beneath the dunes. I will survive. He looks up at the sky, realizing this hellscape is his only reality now. Xian starts moving through the dark, narrow passages of sand, refusing to give up. Xian channels every ounce of his focus as the strange blue liquid coats his skin. He stands alone in the vast desert while a massive, towering beast looms ahead. He can feel every single cell in his body vibrating with this newly awakened power. Clenching his fist, he realizes this is the raw, untamed reality of truly awakening. The scale of the creature makes the lone fighter look like nothing but a speck. He hunkers down in the sand, daring the massive, towering monstrosity to make a move. As he lunges into the attack, a voice warns him that he is in the way. His eyes widen as the sheer force of the encounter hits him like a freight train. He is launched backward through the air, completely overwhelmed by the creature's massive, sudden impact. Skidding across the sand, he struggles to recover from the crushing blow he just took. Gasping for air, he tries to process just how quickly the monster closed the distance. He stares in disbelief at how impossibly close the massive creature managed to get him. Before he can react, a wave of black energy erupts and shreds the landscape apart. Captain Zhang Yongbayam appears atop the beast, casually leaning against his massive embedded sword. With a single explosive kick, the captain forces the creature back toward the first floor. A blinding flash of golden light signals the overwhelming force of the captain's precise strike. Xian remains frozen in a defensive stance, struggling to comprehend the power he just witnessed. Watching the captain effortlessly handle the sandworm, Xian realizes just how far he is behind. A woman appears out of nowhere, cheering as she introduces the powerful Captain Zhang Yongbayam. While she celebrates the captain's speed, Xian is left wondering how she even got there. One of the captives realizes his arm is freezing while trying to process the girl's surprising strength. The boss dismisses the sandworm threat as a minor nuisance while keeping his team in check. He keeps his focus narrow and his patience thin as the situation unfolds before him. The boss demands order while the girl continues to keep a firm grip on their prisoner. She offers a sharp mock salute that highlights her unpredictable and intense personality. The girl keeps the captive off balance by swinging him through the air without any effort. She slams him into the desert sand and pins him down to keep him firmly restrained. She looms over her prize and demands a drum roll before checking for his rank and abilities. A moment of genuine confusion breaks her manic energy as she inspects the man's arm. The captive denies being a normal human as she realizes he lacks any Awakened signature. The boss confirms the man is missing his rank insignia, which should not be possible for an Awakener. The captive insists that every Awakener must have an insignia, accusing them of being blind. From inside their transport, a teammate yells a reminder about the rapidly setting desert sun. The girl asks what to do with the prisoner, noting that leaving him here means certain death. The boss stares on, looking entirely exhausted by this unexpected and messy development. The captive watches the situation spiral, realizing he is completely out of his depth. The boss orders the man into the vehicle, assuming he was headed to the mine anyway. Their transport kicks up a cloud of dust as it tears across the dunes at sunset. Inside the truck, the team continues to bicker over the reckless timing of their departure. Bound and tossed among the supplies, the captive can only groan as the shouting continues. Xian watches as the grains of sand begin to dance in the air before him. Even while pinned in this cramped space, he realizes he can manipulate the desert floor. He confirms the ability is definitely his own and that his awakening has finally triggered. Xian examines his wrists, wondering why his rank insignia does not match the standard color markers. He notices the marking on his forearm has taken on the exact hue of the sand. He knows that the color of a rank insignia should identify an Awakener's specific classification. Magic users are always marked in blue, making their power easy to spot on sight. Combat types are just as obvious, marked clearly by the color red for everyone to see. Xian realizes his own affinity for sand control is something he has never encountered before. Being the only one with this power makes him a target if he is not careful. Despite his insignia showing a bottom-tier F rank, he can sense the raw, infinite potential within. He realizes that if he plays this right, he could be far more than just another pawn. Xian decides to keep this secret buried and wait until he has full control over it. He envisions the entire world becoming his playing field once he finally steps out from shadows. The transport eventually reaches the desolate, jagged terrain surrounding the infamous magic crystal mine. Xian assesses the checkpoint, noting that the facility looks standard enough for a mining operation. A guard barks at him to move, completely ignoring the fact that his hands are bound. As he is hauled toward the gates, a blue-haired woman watches them with lingering suspicion. She points out to her partner that Xian being the lone survivor is statistically impossible. He moves through the industrial tunnels, convinced that his path and that mysterious figure are bound to cross again. Merging into the colony, he finds a bustling underworld that looks more like a neon-lit city than a mine. The place is packed with people living their lives among the pipes, creating a strange, gritty society beneath the surface. A guard threatens him to stay put, but Xian is distracted by the sheer scale of this hidden urban sprawl. The guard keeps his gun trained on him, threatening to end things right there if Xian does not just shut up and wait. With a final insult, the guard turns his back, assuming Xian is nothing more than a helpless rat trapped in a cage. Left to his own devices, Xian decides to kill time and grab a bite before he starts poking around. He finds a food stall and approaches the old man working the grill to ask for some help. Something about the way the old man moves stops Xian dead in his tracks, his guard instantly spiking. A nearby propaganda poster claims the miners are lighting up Neo Soul with mana stones, but the reality feels much colder. The old man hands him a drink, offering a smile that feels far too knowing for a random encounter. He drops a bombshell, telling Xian that mana stones are not the real secret to the city's power grid. Xian leans in, demanding to know what could possibly replace mana stones as the lifeblood of Neo Soul. The old man points a bony finger right at him, making it clear that he is not talking about theory. He explains that expendable people like Xian are the actual fuel, cycled through the system until they're used up. Xian fires back, telling the old man he should worry about his own mortality instead of lecturing strangers. The old man just laughs, casually revealing he already knows exactly how Xian survived the sandworm attack. He mocks Xian for pretending he has a choice, reminding him that the mines always turn people into waste in the end. The old man brushes off the defiance, insisting that Xian needs to see something important. He points toward rows of metallic shelves packed with nothing but piles of cardboard boxes. Xian dismisses the junk as worthless, but the old man claims every piece is a trophy. He drops the facade, telling Xian those boxes contain the remains of everyone who came before. The reality of the mine is that even those who fight the hardest eventually break down. Terror drives them to desperate measures, and eventually everyone sells their soul to keep living. No matter how much they cling to their wealth, the mine claims every last coin eventually. Xian realizes the cycle is inescapable, with the mine swallowing everyone who tries to survive. The old man mocks him, saying that unlike decent people, Xian will leave behind only garbage. He can hardly contain his excitement, waiting to see what kind of trash Xian becomes. Xian tries to pivot to business, asking exactly how much he owes for his meal. The price is 10 sol, which the old man defends as a standard luxury rate. Xian scoffs at the price, bluntly admitting he does not have that kind of cash on him. He calls the old man out for trying to scam a newcomer, demanding a better deal. Suddenly, the room fills with armed figures, all brandishing butcher knives and heavy meat cleavers. Xian tries to stand his ground, insisting he is not handing over a single cent tonight. He quickly realizes the odds are shifting as shadows and a massive figure surround him. The reality of his isolation in the dark finally hits home as his options vanish. The old man asks if he ever wondered how a business survives in such a place. Xian stands surrounded by a sea of glowing eyes and blades, finally seeing the trap. The old man leans in with a twisted grin and demands to know exactly what Xian plans to do next. Xian slams his fist onto the table, his patience clearly reaching a breaking point in the standoff. He tells the old man that he does not have that kind of money and demands they negotiate. Ignoring the plea, the old man shrugs off the lack of cash and suggests a trade instead. Xian reaches for his pocket as the old man reveals he knows exactly about the hidden mana stone. Xian realizes in that moment that word of the artifact has already leaked to the wrong people. The old man holds out his hand, offering a supposed fair price while demanding the stone immediately. A massive brute looms over Xian while an associate screams about the lengths he went to protect this. The giant grabs Xian by the head, but Xian still tries to talk his way out with a pathetic offer. The sand blaster ignores the talking and drives a crushing blow that sends debris flying everywhere. The attacker turns to his boss, demanding permission to just bury the brat once and for all. He lunges forward again, his hand glowing with lethal energy as he prepares to finish the job. Everyone nearby watches in absolute horror as the brutal aftermath of the strike becomes impossible to ignore. Xian goes flying through the air, his body failing to withstand the force of the repeated savage assaults. Dark, ethereal aura suddenly surrounds Xian, his eyes glowing as blood hangs in the air around him. The brute grips Xian's head once more, forcing him to look directly into his face while screaming orders. Xian stares blankly, wondering if he was just dreaming as the attacker asks why he is spacing out. Suddenly the room resets and the old man sits calmly at his table watching energy zip by. Xian is standing there as if nothing happened, quietly handing over the glowing mana stone to the man. The old man inspects the stone with a greedy smirk, clearly satisfied with the size of his prize. Xian pushes back on the low valuation, but the trader refuses to budge on the price. The old man mocks his dire situation and suggests he should have just died out there. Xian slams his hand down, struggling to keep his temper under control during the deal. He considers taking the guy out right now but decides to hold off for the moment. He forces himself to stay calm and demands a better bonus to close the trade instead. The trader warns him about the local thieves while calling Xian a pickpocket to his face. Looking to smooth things over, the guy offers him a free item from the back shelf. He gestures toward a pile of literal garbage, telling Xian he can pick anything he wants. Xian digs through the junk and finds absolutely nothing of value in the entire cluttered mess. The trader watches him with interest, clearly amused by the kid's critical and demanding attitude. He notes that it has been a long time since he saw such stubborn, petty persistence. Xian stops dead when he spots something hidden deep within the pile of discarded items. The trader mentions that the object was left behind by a caravan a long time ago. Xian decides this hourglass is the only thing here worth taking and claims it immediately. The old man insults his choice, but Xian does not even bother to fire back a retort. As he walks away, Xian shouts back to ask for the trader's name for his records. The old man yells back that his name is Klexi before waving him off dismissively. Xian scowls, hoping he never has to cross paths with a guy like Klexi ever again. They head in opposite directions, though Klexi seems convinced their paths will cross once more. The hourglass rests in the darkness, the sand inside settling as its true purpose remains hidden. Xian tracks the sand, noting the 10 minutes left before the hourglass completely runs out. Back in the miner's quarters, he sits on the floor and starts his breathing exercises. He focuses entirely on his rhythm, cycling through deep inhalations and slow, controlled, steady breaths. His concentration sharpens as he continues the cycle, trying to find a rhythm that works. He grips the hourglass with both hands and commands it to move using his internal energy. He stares through the glass, waiting for any sign that his power is actually taking hold. Nothing happens, and he grumbles in frustration because the artifact clearly is not tied to his awakening. He pauses to rethink the situation, certain he has never encountered this specific item before today. Still, the sight of it in the trash heap triggers a strange, lingering sense of déjà vu. It feels brand new, yet he cannot shake the feeling that it is calling out to him. His train of thought breaks when a massive guy kicks the door open to start trouble. This is Manhwa, and he is furious that Xian is still in his room instead of mining. Xian stays calm, correcting the guy's attitude while pointing out he was never given any instructions. Manhwa immediately lashes out with a heavy punch, catching Xian completely off guard with the force. The senior is not interested in a conversation, and he winds up for another massive hit. Manhwa slams his fist into the floor, screaming for the kid to shut his mouth already. The beating continues as Manhwa vents his rage, demanding to know why the kid is talking back. Manhwa assumes Xian is just another unawakened loser who needs to learn his place through pain. Panting, Manhwa finally stops the assault and orders the battered kid to follow him to work. Xian stays on the ground, clutching his injured arm while the senior looms over him waiting. Xian marks the name Manhwa in his memory and vows to end him. They reach the Sector 3 mine entrance where the air is thick with smoke and dread. The overseer greets Manhwa and immediately orders his subordinate to get the gear ready. He tells the miners that every piece of equipment comes straight out of their own paychecks. The miner tries to protest the high costs before the overseer cuts him off mid-sentence. A pickaxe slams down to shut everyone up and assert total control over the room. The boss keeps barking insults and threatens to charge them for every single tool they use. He orders the miners into shaft 972 and the men realize they are being sent to their deaths. Faced with a choice between the mine or a beating, the miners decide to just give in. The overseer warns them not to emerge without a mana stone unless they want to die. It is a stroke of bad luck that Xian arrived when Manhwa is deep in gambling debt. As they descend, the miners talk about how this place is just as rotten as Neo Seoul. They realize that men like Manhwa are the reason why the local underworld is thriving. One miner mocks his own soft hands and sarcastically claims he will probably be just fine. He clarifies that he is not worried about injuries because nobody ever survives long enough to get hurt. The elevator doors slide open to reveal the dark and foggy entrance of Tunnel 972. Xian asks about the mining quota, but his companion tells him he will not be coming back. Over a dozen people have vanished inside, and now local gamblers are betting on Xian's survival. Xian turns to his companion to offer a final word of thanks and a genuine apology. The older man just stares back, fully aware that Xian is walking into an impossible death trap. The worker realizes he has been abandoned to die and starts screaming for someone to return. He's left completely alone in the dark mine and struggles to process the sudden betrayal. Consumed by pure rage, he swings his pickaxe while cursing the people who sent him here. The momentum of his wild swing causes him to lose his balance and slip on the floor. He lunges forward in a desperate attempt to catch his falling tool before it hits the ground. He lands in a strange cavernous space and wonders what kind of place he has stumbled into. He notices the air is unnaturally thick with mana and realizes ordinary people would never survive here. The energy pressure keeps rising as he moves deeper and he tries to find the source. He stops dead in his tracks when he senses a massive and dangerous presence waiting ahead. He spots his broken pickaxe lying on the ground near a strange and ominous red glow. He steps toward the weapon and laughs, relieved that he managed to find it despite the damage. As he reaches for his gear, a massive vortex of red energy suddenly erupts in the tunnel. He stares directly into the swirling power and realizes he is facing something far beyond his control. He recoils in total disbelief as he realizes he has discovered an active portal in the mine. The raw force of the red vortex begins to pull both the man and his weapon inward. His headlamp flickers over the broken wooden handle resting on the ground as the portal consumes everything. His mind flashes back to a cold memory of being abandoned as a child in the rain. He remembers being beaten and starved by a group of thugs who took everything he had. The memory shifts to a violent struggle where he tried to fight back and escape his situation. He recalls the moment he killed a man and realized his life was essentially over, leaving him running. Xian falls through the void while his captors demand he be kept alive at any cost. They want him delivered to Li Jiryong and they do not care how much damage they cause. Xian hits the dirt, still clinging to the hope of living a normal life. He lies motionless in the dust as smoke swirls around his broken, exhausted body. He shakes off the haze, noticing the air is stifling and impossibly hot. After touching the ground, he realizes the gray dust coating everything is actually volcanic ash. A sudden tremor rocks the terrain, forcing him to shift his position. He scans his surroundings and the grim reality of his situation begins to set in. He finally connects the dots, remembering how the portal dumped him into this nightmare. Looking at the jagged, burning horizon, he confirms he is trapped inside a dungeon. Steam vents from the floor as he kneels on the scorching, unstable terrain. He brushes against the ground, hearing his own skin begin to sizzle immediately. The intense heat forces a reflex reaction as he realizes how lethal this environment is. He knows he is not dreaming, acknowledging that even in Neo Seoul, dungeons are death traps. With his lungs already burning, he realizes the ash will kill him before the monsters do. He wastes no time cinching his boots tight to prepare for a grueling trek. He wraps a cloth around his face, reasoning that every dungeon entrance must have an exit. He locks his eyes on the massive, fiery volcanic peak looming over the landscape. With no monsters currently blocking his path, he knows he has to move immediately to survive. He breaks into a sprint, determined to reach the summit before the heat claims him. Xian clears the chasm in a desperate leap, screaming into the void that he is not going down without a fight. He barely manages to catch the cliff edge, his boots scraping for purchase as he pulls himself onto the rock. Looking down at the churning lava below, he realizes just how thin the line is between survival and death. He drags himself upward, his voice cracking as he begs for just one more second to find a stable foothold. Pushing off the wall with everything he has left, he vaults over the rising plumes of heat and debris. He lands on a narrow ledge, spitting out defiance while the heat tries to boil the air in his lungs. The exhaustion finally hits and he collapses onto the scorching ground, his breathing ragged and out of control. He digs his fingers into the volcanic earth, his knuckles turning white as he fights to steady his shaking hands. He lets out a primal scream, cursing the man who put him here and swearing he will make him pay. As the rage burns off, he forces himself to stand, turning his anger into the fuel he needs to keep moving. Clenching his fist against his leg, he makes a silent pact to fight through the pain and claw his way back. He stares out into the dark, desolate path ahead, mentally counting the final obstacles standing in his way. With only 4 jumps left to clear this hell, he readies himself for the final stretch of his escape. He shuts down the fear, focusing solely on the rhythm of his own heartbeat and the next step forward. His resolve hardens, and he refuses to let his story end in a pit of fire and molten rock. He hurls himself toward the exit, shouting his refusal to give up as he clears the gap in the air. He lunges straight into the center of the massive glowing stone structure that guards the path to the outside. The heavy stone jaws of the mountain slam shut behind him with a force that shakes the entire cavern. A violent blast of stone and fire erupts from the impact, marking the sheer scale of the collision. The lava below begins to ripple and bubble from the shockwave, leaving the outcome of his gamble hanging in the air. A massive beast waits in the darkness, its rocky hide glowing in the molten heat. Molten liquid drips steadily from the creature, turning the air into a searing orange furnace. He struggles to catch his breath, barely grasping the reality of the extreme dungeon temperatures. A sudden realization hits him that he can actually manipulate the volcanic ash around him. His body fails him, and he hits the ground hard as the heat overwhelms him. He realizes the environment itself is far more lethal than any monster he has faced. As his consciousness begins to slip away, he struggles to take even a single breath. He lies motionless in the darkness, left with only the terrifying thought of his death. He digs his fingers into the dirt, refusing to let his life end in this pit. He forces himself upright, determined to survive long enough to experience a normal life. He jokingly begs the god of the dead to take someone else instead of him. The massive creature suddenly snaps its jaws, engulfing the entire area in a burst of fire. A voice cuts through the chaos, commenting on his rare ability to control the sand. He's stunned to hear a voice, wondering if the god of the dead has arrived. The creature confirms his power is fascinating, leaving him completely shocked by the sudden reveal. An old man with wild white hair suddenly drops from the sky toward the beast. The newcomer wears a manic grin, clearly delighted by the intensity of the current situation. He shouts out as he descends, finding the absurdity of his own entrance hilarious. The old man grips his weapon tightly, ready to engage in whatever fight comes next. He dives toward the battlefield, his tattered robes flying as he prepares to strike hard. Xian freezes in his tracks because he knows exactly what kind of destruction is headed his way. A massive pillar of energy slams into the ground and sends a shockwave through the entire area. The earth simply cannot handle the raw pressure of the impact and starts to shatter into pieces. Everything nearby is swallowed up by a violent vortex of dust and debris from the blast. Xian takes the full force of the fallout and ends up curled on the ground in agony. He's completely disoriented and struggling to process how one person could unleash that much raw power. Through the chaos, he tries to track the monster, but realizes the old man has already changed the game. Xian looks up from the wreckage to find the stranger standing tall in the center of the crater. He realizes right away that he's dealing with someone far beyond any normal awakener he has met. The old man stands there like a titan with glowing red eyes and a massive blade in hand. A heavy boot steps onto the scorched earth as the stranger asserts his dominance over the battlefield. The man does not care about the destruction he caused and simply demands to know what is going on. Xian is still reeling from the impact as the man looms over him to demand his name. The old man gives him a very short window to respond before things get even worse for him. The countdown starts immediately with the cold declaration of 3. 2 follows in an instant while the air around them stays thick with heat and tension. Xian stares up at his tormentor as the final count of 1 rings out. The man immediately decides the answer is wrong before Xian even gets a chance to speak up. Xian is left completely dazed and confused by the man's erratic and aggressive behavior. The stranger grows impatient with the silence, forcing Xian to explain that his eardrums were blown out. The guy suddenly shifts gears, deciding he can hear just fine after all. He drops the act and immediately tells the kid to prepare for death. Xian scrambles to beg for his life, finally making it clear he is not a mute. The older man demands a name and he gets an answer loud and clear. Daoden calls the name pathetic, leaving Xian wondering who this guy thinks he is. A blast of red energy tears through the floor, shaking the entire cavern apart. Daoden closes the distance in a heartbeat to introduce himself properly. He grabs Xian by the face, making sure the kid knows exactly who he is. Xian demands to know why he's being bullied and threatened for no reason. Even after saving his life, Daoden keeps the insults coming without hesitation. Daoden points out that Xian is currently trapped inside a dungeon snare. He explains that the dungeon is just venting excess mana to protect itself. The snare acts like a vacuum, dragging in anything unlucky enough to be nearby. Xian realizes his rotten luck is all thanks to Park Man-ho's interference. Xian tries to stand his ground, but the name-calling just will not stop. Daoden forces him to focus, demanding that he channel mana into his eyes. Xian stammers through the instruction as his eye begins to glow with power. The lesson is simple: stop looking with his eyes and start feeling with mana. A horrific biological structure of the dungeon is suddenly revealed to his sight. Xian recoils at the sight, but Daoden is finally satisfied that the kid sees. Daoden points out a cloaked beast that kills its prey without them ever knowing. Xian realizes he was completely blind to the monster standing inches away from him. A sudden strike narrowly misses him, and he realizes he was moments from death. It is clear that Daoden has already saved his life twice in this encounter. Xian wonders just how powerful his mentor actually is to move with such speed. He demands to know who the old man is, but only gets a sharp rebuke. Xian keeps pressing for answers about the source of that overwhelming lethal strength. Daoden reveals they're standing inside his own personal dungeon hunting ground. The man tells him to stop asking questions and just watch what happens next. He summons a dark, ornate weapon called Crayon that shifts the air around them. A massive wave of dark energy erupts and tears through the landscape like wildfire. Xian collapses as the sheer pressure of the mana strikes him like a physical blow. He struggles to process the scale of the destruction unfolding right in front of him. A swarm of flaming, bird-like creatures descends on the area to attack them both. Deoden snaps him out of his shock by shouting for his attention. The old man commands him to survive the incoming wave of monsters on his own. Xian realizes the training has turned into a desperate fight for his life. He braces against the heat and curses the impossible speed of the incoming beasts. He lunges forward and throws a punch to intercept the nearest attacker. Planting his feet, he pivots to deliver a strike that cuts through the chaos. Xian is completely swarmed by these shadow creatures and realizes his speed is not enough to escape. He lashes out with his own dark energy, trying to shove back the encroaching danger. Flaming birds dive from every direction, turning the area into a burning trap. He takes a direct hit and gets tossed aside by the sheer force of their barrage. Xian realizes he cannot keep up with his current senses or his standard physical reactions. He knows if he stays frozen in this void, he is definitely going to die. He reminds himself that he cannot die here after the old man saved him twice. A voice snaps him back to reality, demanding an answer while he remains dazed. The old man complains about the boy being unable to communicate or even listen properly. Desperate for a solution, Xian searches for a way to track enemies that defy his vision. The pressure mounts as the firebirds continue their assault while the old man yells. Xian stays silent, finally focusing on the lesson instead of the insults being hurled his way. The instruction is clear: he must increase his mana purity and shift his focus inward. He pushes his mana into his vision, changing how he perceives the world around him. One of the flaming beasts dives toward him, exposing its position through its own power. With his new perception, Xian finally manages to weave through the chaotic, fiery attacks. He stops relying on sight and starts sensing the magic power radiating from every beast. He prepares to intercept the next one, aiming to counter at the absolute minimum distance. Lunging into the fire, he realizes the old man orchestrated this entire dangerous situation. He strikes out with precision, knowing the master predicted this breakthrough all along. The survivor watches in complete shock as a massive beast towers over the landscape. The old man ignores the chaos and seems to be having the time of his life. A massive wave of pure energy tears through the center of the battlefield. Driven by an insatiable need for a challenge, the warrior pushes himself even further. He leaps into the heat of the fight and demands even more from the monsters. With a single strike, the warrior shatters the boss monster's skull against the floor. He looks down at the defeated creature and finds the entire encounter incredibly underwhelming. The warrior stands over the carcass, his presence alone dwarfing the power of the beast. He complains about the lack of decent dungeons these days while the carnage cools down. Nearby, a wounded survivor watches the carnage while struggling to process what he just saw. He admits he is completely stunned that such a massive monster fell so easily. The young man tries to continue speaking, but the physical toll is clearly too much. He manages to choke out a reference to a specific distance, marking his breaking point. The ground beneath them erupts as a massive explosion rips through the cavern floor. The survivor collapses to the ground, his body giving way under the sudden, intense agony. He struggles to maintain his composure while coughing up blood in the aftermath of the blast. The old man kneels beside him, identifying the source of the roar echoing through the cavern. He reveals that every dungeon hides a final boss, and this is the true objective. A massive entity wreathed in blue flames descends to claim the battlefield as its own. The survivor stares at the emerging threat, realizing they are nowhere near finished yet. A grizzled veteran looms over the scene with a wild grin and hungry red eyes. The massive crimson drake descends, its body wreathed in chaotic orange fire and blue energy. The younger man learns this is not just a dragon but a genuine B-rank threat. Tension spikes as a pulsating orb of blue magic signals an incoming, unavoidable attack. The beast manifests a crackling force field that signals its immense magical output. The veteran explains that monsters possess unique traits just like human awakeners do. Red force fields identify combat types, but the blue one here means something far worse. Jagged shards of blue energy confirm the monster's specific lethal classification. The drake towers above as a massive sphere of energy gathers between its jaws. Terror hits the younger man as he realizes this magic type is completely overpowered. A gargantuan cross-shaped construct of energy crashes down onto the battlefield. The young man stares up at the sky, frozen as the massive structure descends. All his previous experience and common sense feel suddenly and utterly meaningless. Even his desperate fight seems small compared to the crushing presence of the veteran. A cataclysmic white flash erupts, tearing through the air and obliterating the surroundings. The dragon's clawed hand surges forward, surging with electricity and cold, predatory focus. The veteran stands his ground, gripping his weapon as the magical storm descends. He lunges into the fray with a battle-hungry roar, embracing the overwhelming danger. The beast's massive head looms over the veteran as they prepare for a collision. Lost in the thrill of combat, the old man grins into the swirling energy. The crimson drake surges forward and pins the veteran beneath a crushing wave of energy. That white-haired maniac just laughs, mocking the beast while relishing in the absolute chaos. He tightens his grip on his blade and promises the dragon a swift, violent end. Unleashing a torrent of power, he screams that this is the moment the dragon finally falls. Meanwhile, the kid is losing his mind, fully convinced he is about to become collateral damage. He desperately yells for these lunatics to stop fighting and start acting like reasonable human beings. He barely has time to react before a volley of shadowy projectiles forces him to defend. A massive discharge of energy slams him into the ruins, leaving him completely unable to move. Even the bystanders are losing their cool, terrified that the mere shockwaves are leveling the terrain. kid forces himself to look up, bracing for whatever lethal strike is coming next. That psycho with the blade keeps cackling, calling the total destruction of the area pure fun. He mocks the dragon, asking if the fiery vortex around them feels like an amusement park. A colossal explosion detonates between them, tearing the ground apart and sending debris flying everywhere. Suddenly, jagged spikes of dark energy erupt from the earth, boxing the kid into a corner. He looks around, realizing the exits are gone and there is nowhere left for him to run. The realization hits him hard and he knows he is truly out of his depth. The sheer force of the clash sends him flying, tumbling down into the darkness of a cavern. He slams into the cavern floor, sliding across the dirt as his body finally gives out. A final repelling blast tosses his limp frame against the orange-hued wall of the deep pit. He hits the ground motionless and broken, his eyes staring blankly at the ceiling in defeat. Deoden stares down the beast, his focus locked in on the final kill. He plunges toward the lava floor as the dragon looms high above him like a nightmare. With a twisted grin, Deoden mocks the creature for being so pathetic. He screams that a dungeon boss should not be acting like this in front of him. The dragon opens its massive jaws, charging up a final lethal blast of energy. Deoden just sneers, impressed that the beast still has one trick left to play. A blinding beam of pure light tears through the cavern, turning the rocks to dust. The explosion rocks the entire chamber, scattering burning debris across the battlefield. The dragon lets out a deafening roar, surrounding the area in a freezing, deadly mist. Its massive head towers over the wreckage, taunting Deoden to find his mark. A shadow blade slams down with enough force to pin the creature to the earth. The dragon snaps its jagged jaws, trying to channel its remaining power to retaliate. Deoden stands over his prey, finally ending a hunt that has lasted an entire year. He needs the dragon's heart to feed Crayon, and he is not leaving without it. His eyes burn with absolute intent as he orders the creature to die. He drives his ornate blade deep into the ground, sparking a massive surge of energy. A vortex of chaotic blue light erupts, swirling violently around the fallen armored monster. The hilt of his weapon vibrates with a lethal power that hums through the air. Ancient markings flare along the blade, glowing with a fierce and burning crimson light. Deoden stands amidst the storm, his blade pulsing with the power to claim the prize. That dark blade is pulsing with unstable energy as fragments of metal start to peel away. The old man grips the hilt tight and gives a look that spells serious trouble. He starts muttering to the weapon like it's an old friend he hasn't seen in years. The kid is not having any of it and immediately calls out how insane the geezer sounds. He admits the old guy is strong for killing a drake, but insults him for surviving. The boy is clearly running on fumes after everything he just went through in this fight. Before he can even catch his breath, a massive force blasts him right off the cliff. He's caught off guard as the impact hits, leaving him reeling from the sudden, violent strike. He tries to hold it together, but whatever hit him is clearly putting on immense pressure. Shards of dark energy lash out and swarm around him as he screams in pure agony. His body is tossed through the air like a ragdoll against the backdrop of the explosion. He hits the ground hard, barely managing to breathe while realizing he's still somehow alive. He figures out that the shockwaves actually sharpened his reflexes, which is why he did not die. The old man warns that the entire place is coming down and they need to move. The kid barely registers the warning before he's suddenly grabbed by the collar without any notice. The geezer just breaks into a wild, maniacal laugh like he's having the time of his life. Without a second thought, he tosses the boy straight into the center of a dimensional rift. The kid curses him out on the way down, comparing his madness to a total nightmare. He reaches for anything to grab onto as the reality of the situation finally hits him. He face-splints into the desert sand outside, left gasping for air while the portal closes up. Xian spits out the sand and realizes they exited the dungeon through one of the cracks. He complains they could have just walked out, but the old man shuts him up fast. Deoden tells him his sand powers have potential, but he is currently way too weak to matter. The old man points toward Neo Soul and asks if he wants to return to his old life, or he offers a second option: he could stick around and learn how to actually be useful. Xian is clearly caught off guard and wonders how long this supposed training would even last. Deoden does not have an answer, saying it could take months, years, or even decades to finish. The pressure is on and the old man demands he makes a decision right this second. Deoden walks away, leaving him to weigh a comfortable life against a near-certain death sentence. They lock eyes for a tense moment, with the old man waiting for a final answer. Xian just starts laughing, acting like the whole ultimatum is a complete joke to him. He calls the old man out, asking if he has completely lost his damn mind. He lists off everything he's giving up, like shade and a bed, to trek through the desert. Deoden does not blink, confirming that is exactly the deal he is offering the kid. Xian wipes his neck and his tone shifts, making it clear he has already decided. He stands tall and tells the old man that he is definitely coming along for the ride. He admits he is too weak to get revenge on the people he hates right now. With a twisted grin, he adds that the old man is at the top of his hit list too. Xian acknowledges that Deoden is the strongest person he has ever encountered by a massive margin. The old man just laughs, asking if that means he is absolutely certain Xian is going to die. Xian clenches his fist and swears that following the old man is his only path to real power. Deoden just grins, promising that this choice is something the kid will live to regret. He starts trekking across the dunes, barking at Xian to keep up and stop complaining about the insults. The desert sun is absolutely brutal, turning the entire landscape into a massive, hazy oven. After hours of non-stop movement, Xian is already at his limit and starts begging for a break. He shouts that 6 hours of walking is enough, but the old man just keeps pushing forward. Deoden does not even look back, his massive sword slung over his shoulder as he paces ahead. Frustration boils over as Xian demands to know why the guy is acting like a moody teenager. The heat is pushing well over 100 degrees and the thick sand is making every step a nightmare. Every movement is a struggle as their boots sink deep into the shifting, unstable desert ground. Xian is on the verge of heat stroke, but Daoden just mocks him for failing to tap into his own strength. The old man points out the absurdity of a guy who can control sand being defeated by the terrain. Xian screams back that he is still a total amateur who only awakened his abilities a few days ago. Daoden does not care about the excuses and stares him down with a cold, sharp glare. Xian tries to hide behind his F-class rank, claiming he was never built to be a top-tier fighter. That sets the old man off and he explodes, telling Xian to cut the pathetic, defeatist nonsense. He grabs the kid by the collar and roars that being born high rank is just a matter of luck. He screams that Xian has already been blessed with enough, so he has no right to quit now. The word hits hard, leaving Xian standing there in silence as the reality of the lecture sinks in. Daoden tells him to quit the whining and finally figure out how to use his power instead of being useless. Xian freezes as the old man reminds him that this power belongs to him alone. He insists that Xian must stop relying on others and figure out how to push his limits. The old man clamps down on his shoulder, delivering a painful lesson in physical urgency. He screams that failure means death, forcing an immediate, desperate agreement out of the kid. Xian takes a step, and the sand beneath him explodes into a violent, kinetic spray. He stands steady as jagged shards of sand rise up around him like razor-sharp blades. He notes a 5-meter control range and decides to work within that limited, tight radius. Shifting his focus to the ground, he realizes he can save mana by manipulating the surface. He tests the idea of condensing the loose sand into a solid, stable platform for travel. It works, and he bounces across the dunes with ease while the old man watches. The celebration is short-lived because he realizes the technique burns through his mana way too fast. He pivots to a new strategy, funneling his mana directly into his legs for better movement. The old man observes this progress, silently acknowledging the natural grit that only the young possess. Xian collapses face-first into the dirt, but he forces himself back up without a single complaint. The veteran notes that despite his F-class label, Xian is already operating at an E or D level. Xian finally finds his rhythm, standing tall on the sand with his feet glowing from exertion. He rushes over to show off his success, bragging about how much easier the terrain is now. He gets a little too cocky, mocking the old man for being unable to move with such comfort. The taunting ends instantly when a heavy fist slams into the back of his head. Xian faceplants into the sand again as the old man warns him that his arrogance will kill him. Xian is barely conscious in the sand until his companion snaps him back to reality. He finally wakes up, completely disoriented and struggling to remember how he even got there. The old man does not care about his condition, telling him he's just wasting precious time. Xian fires back, frustrated that he's being treated like this while covered in fresh wounds. The argument pauses when a piece of food lands in the dirt right in front of him. His mentor tosses him something to eat and demands his full attention for a life story. The old man describes a forgotten time when protecting the weak was actually a noble trait. He admits he still struggles to accept how much the world has devolved since those days. He gives Xian a simple choice between staying down to die or getting up to fight. Xian drags himself up from the dust, finally accepting that he has to keep moving forward. He stops to look at his mentor, realizing there is more to this guy than just insults. He wonders how many decades of memories are buried behind that rough exterior he shows off. He watches the old man carefully, noticing the specific way he softens the tough, dry jerky. It turns out there is a practical reason for that, even if the old man waited forever. Xian realizes his mentor is teaching him how to survive on his own rather than hand-feeding. The two sit in the middle of the empty desert, preparing for another long, harsh night. Xian tries to push his luck by asking for more, but he gets shut down immediately. The desert temperature drops fast, and Xian ends up sneezing as the freezing air hits him. He complains about the sudden cold while the old man just keeps stretching in the background. Xian watches the old man talk to his sword all night, wondering if he has lost it. The old man makes a desperate plea for water while struggling with his gear. Xian realizes he's being cut out of the stash again and calls him out. Desperate for moisture, Xian resorts to licking the dew off his own clothing. He swears revenge once he gains strength, but the old man cuts his thoughts short. They trade insults before the old man asks if he senses the incoming change. Xian stops his internal ranting to focus on the shift in his surroundings. He picks up on a subtle vibration traveling through the ground beneath his feet. The reality hits him that they are not dealing with a single threat. They shift into a defensive stance as a pack of predators circles them in the dark. The old man identifies the pack as great horned hyenas that have tracked them down. He taunts Xian, questioning if he is capable of handling the pack without any assistance. The hungry hyenas cut the conversation short as they launch a synchronized attack. Xian refuses the help, insisting he can take on the entire pack by himself. He shouts his defiance at the swarm, determined to prove he can survive this trial. Channeling his focus, he prepares to unleash his internal power against the encroaching beasts. He slams his energy into the ground, creating a wall that forces the predators back. The strain shows as his eyes glow with the intensity of the effort he is exerting. A violent shockwave ripples outward, sending the hyenas flying through the air around him. He reels from the sudden exertion, overwhelmed by the sheer number of enemies still closing in. With his mana running dry, he realizes he needs a strategy before he collapses from exhaustion. Xian realizes brute force will not cut it and starts prioritizing efficiency over raw power. He focuses on his mana reserves, desperate to find a way to make every drop count. A predator lunges at him, but he keeps his guard up while still clutching his energy. He lashes out at the beast, snapping at the pack to give him a second to think. A nasty bite wound on his arm catches his attention, acting like a sudden, painful wake-up call. He stares at the puncture wound, realizing that a small hole is all it takes to incapacitate. The pack surges forward again, a blur of red eyes and teeth closing in on his position. Amidst the chaos, he stops reacting to the chaos and starts preparing his next calculated move. He has a breakthrough, deciding that he only needs to create a single hole to win. He fires a precise golden strike, proving that he finally understands how to conserve his energy. He realizes he does not need to blow them apart, just put a hole through them to kill. He remembers the lesson that wasting mana in a panic is just a shortcut to the grave. His new combat philosophy is set, focusing purely on minimum lethality for the minimum mana cost. He cuts through the charging horde with surgical precision, keeping his movements lean and incredibly effective. He spots the old man ahead, adopting the same slow, methodical pace to clear the field. A beast latches onto the old man, mockingly telling him the bite barely even tickles. The old man does not hesitate, immediately retaliating with a strike that puts the creature down for good. He turns his fury toward the entire pack, vowing that no creature that draws blood will survive. Xian watches in disbelief, realizing the old man is spiraling back into a reckless, lethal frenzy. The old man screams out a command to exterminate every last one of them without mercy. The ground erupts as a wave of dark energy carves a path of absolute ruin. The kid barely dodges the blast, sprinting for his life as the earth shatters behind him. He freezes in his tracks, realizing the sheer scale of the destruction is putting others at risk. A massive crater opens up where the strike hit, pulsing with a dark and suffocating shadow. Xian stares at the carnage left behind, realizing this kind of power does not even require a skill. The reality of his own mortality hits home, and he decides to check his ego before he dies. The old man stands over the alpha hyena, mocking the beast for being such a loudmouth leader. The creature does not take the bait, lying down, lunging forward, wreathed in crackling blue electrical energy. A sudden force field snaps into place, revealing the beast is far stronger than they anticipated. The electrical discharge slams into the barrier, creating a violent shockwave that rattles the entire area. Watching from the sidelines, Xian loses his cool and screams a desperate warning at the older man. The old man does not even flinch, charging his own fist with a surge of raw electrical power. Xian stares at the unfolding brawl, completely unable to process how the situation just shifted so quickly. Instead of being overwhelmed, the old man treats the lethal electric assault like a simple shoulder massage. With a chilling grin and glowing eyes, he decides the game is over and moves for the kill. He delivers a single, crushing blow that sends the giant beast flying back through the air. Xian forces a laugh, deciding it is safer for his sanity to just ignore the monster he is traveling with. The old man collects his prize and calls Xian out for being a lucky dumbass for surviving this long. He explains that the hyena's horn carries lightning properties and can be forged into a lethal weapon. Without a second thought, he tosses the newly fashioned dagger through the air and tells the kid to catch. He tosses the weapon over and tells the kid that from now on he is on his own for food. He warns that the hyena muscle is toxic and lethal, so the kid better stick to the flank. He snaps at the kid to quit staring and get moving before the sun gets too high up. The kid stammers out a quick yes, and they head toward the massive, jagged cliffs ahead. The kid wanders through the dunes and thinks that having a decent meal is not half bad. He figures he can handle the thirst as long as he has enough meat to keep him going. He notices his new sand walk skill is making the trek across the desert floor way easier. Feeling cocky, he mocks the old man for getting slow and asks if he is struggling to keep up. The old man swings a fist at him, but the kid just laughs and taunts him for missing. The punch cuts through thin air, and the kid keeps on laughing as he dodges the blow. The old man puts him in his place, tired of the kid acting tough over one minor skill. The kid drops the act and admits he is actually parched despite all the joking around earlier. He freezes mid-step when he catches a faint, unexpected scent of moisture in the dry desert air. Seeing the old man stare intensely at the horizon, he realizes he is not just imagining things. They both fix their eyes on the golden light shimmering ahead, wondering if an oasis is actually there. They climb the final dune and peer out over the vast expanse looking for some sign of life. The kid is blown away to see that the rumors of an oasis were actually completely true. They reach the edge of the water and the kid yells out in excitement at the sight. He scrambles toward the pool, desperate to finally get a drink after so many days in the heat. The old man just watches him with a click of his tongue, clearly unimpressed by the spectacle. He scrambles up the final dune, completely losing his mind because he finally reached the water. He dives right in, letting the liquid wash away the exhaustion of his long desert trek. The sheer relief of the cool water is almost too much for him to handle right now. He thinks about how brutal the 50-degree heat has been and finally starts to feel human again. A strange, glowing light suddenly pulses from deep within the water, cutting his relaxation short. He stares at the growing, warm light, wondering what the hell is actually hiding down there. The light has a weird, hypnotic effect and he starts to drift off into a heavy daze. A sharp shout snaps him back to reality, pulling him out of his weird, dreamlike state. The older warrior does not hesitate for a second and lunges across the sand toward the pool. The kid is still sitting in the water, totally oblivious to the massive threat closing in. A giant sand angler bursts from the dunes, using its glowing lure to bait its next meal. The veteran grabs the kid by the collar and yanks him out of the water just in time. The monster looms over them both, its massive frame casting a shadow as they scramble away. Reality hits the kid like a freight train once he realizes how close he was to death. The creature snaps its needle-like teeth shut where the kid was sitting, missing him by inches. The warrior swings his blade, slicing through the spray to keep the beast at a distance. The kid realizes he's looking at a legendary predator he thought was just a fairy tale. A rainbow cuts across the sky above them, marking the presence of the deadly hunter in the sand. The veteran explains that the lure is just a trap to draw in prey before the kill. He keeps his focus locked on the monster, ready to end this fight before it goes further. The veteran drops Xian into the dirt, proving that his combat training still has a long way to go. Xian gets chewed out for getting cocky just because he survived a few days in the desert. The old man makes it clear that being an idiot is the fastest way to get killed out here. Xian takes the hit and keeps his head down while the veteran waits for him to get it together. He gets ordered to skin the beast, but Xian has no idea what he is supposed to be doing. The veteran explains that the sand angler's belly skin is perfect for making a protective survival robe. When Xian asks if the old man needs one, the veteran completely loses his patience with the kid. He screams that the robe is for Xian, questioning if the kid's brain is literally rotting away. Xian just takes the verbal abuse, bleeding from the ear as he tries to apologize for the misunderstanding. He looks at the monster and realizes it shares the same anatomy as a fish back on Earth. The veteran tells him to quit staring and get to work, since Xian clearly has never seen a fish before. Xian is genuinely floored by the realization, as he has never encountered anything like it in his life. He starts working on the carcass with his knife, though he is still clearly intimidated by the creature. The veteran gets fed up with his clumsy technique and shoves him aside to show him how it is done. Xian watches the master work and realizes that brute force alone is not going to cut through this hide. He closes his eyes and starts to channel his focus, trying to approach the task with a different mindset. Xian pours his mana into the blade, turning his simple knife into a precise tool for the job. He starts shaving the fins down to use as makeshift needles, showing he is finally starting to adapt. He figures out that he can use the beast's own tendons as thread to stitch the hide together. Realization hits him as he sees his own potential, and he finally understands how to craft what he needs. The elder calls the boy an idiot for wasting materials while the kid panics over his failure. Our master is unfazed though, already planning to start the whole process over from scratch. They set up in the middle of a desolate desert under a swirling, ominous night sky. After endless attempts, the kid finally pulls together a finished robe and celebrates his hard-earned success. He's already dreaming of selling his work to the boutique while the elder watches with raw materials. The master is not interested in the robe and immediately ruins the mood by calling him over again. He tosses a raw, dripping organ toward the kid and orders him to eat the whole thing. The boy recognizes it as a rare sand angler gallbladder and hesitates at the gross demand. The elder makes it clear that this is not a suggestion, giving him a lethal ultimatum instead. Impatience sets in as the master holds the organ out, forcing the kid to just accept it. There is no way out of this, so the boy prepares himself for the miserable task ahead. He forces himself to bite into the bitter, raw mass rather than face the master's wrath. After the first bite, he stops and realizes there is something strange about the organ's texture. He keeps eating, but notices it feels like swallowing clouds since he never actually feels full. He manages to finish the last piece, thinking he might finally get a break from this torture. The elder just watches him from the fire and casually announces that it is time to burn. A glowing, fiery pattern suddenly starts spreading across the kid's chest as he asks what is happening. The energy inside him turns volatile and violent, forcing him into a fit of hacking and coughing. A blinding light bursts from his chest while he gasps, realizing this is far beyond simple heat. A sun-like core of mana is tearing through his system, making him fear he is about to explode. The old man does not care about the screaming and just tells Xian to endure it. He stares at the oasis and warns that everything here eventually gets swallowed by the sand. He points out the eggs of the sand anglers to show that this cycle of rebirth continues. Xian kicks the ground and snaps at him to cut the sentimentality and just save his life. He keeps screaming for help, his throat clearly failing him from the intensity of the poison. The old man just looks back with a tired glare and ignores all that frantic energy. Xian keeps threatening him from the void, but the old man just wants to get some sleep. Xian eventually comes to, waking up on the sand and trying to piece together where he is. The old man is hovering right over him, upside down, and mocks him for finally waking up. Xian jumps back in shock, complaining that the old man nearly gave him a heart attack. The old man laughs it off, but Xian clarifies he did not sleep, he just passed out cold. When asked how he feels, Xian stares at his own hands and realizes something has changed inside. He grips his chest as he feels his internal mana shifting into something entirely new. He stands in a literal storm of energy, feeling his muscles harden and his power surge. Xian is stunned by his sudden growth and wonders how he got so strong so fast. The old man nonchalantly explains that the sand angler's gallbladder did the heavy lifting for him. He adds that the organ is basically a high-tier medicine that packs the value of a mana stone. Xian is floored by the value of what he just consumed, questioning why the man gave it away. The old man scoffs and says he only did it because Xian was too weak to be useful. Xian decides to embrace his new role as the reliable sidekick, but the old man just demands he keep eating. The horizon takes on a strange, golden hue that feels like the calm before a storm. They finally finish off the last of the meat after camping out for 4 days straight. The old man gives the signal to pack up and get moving again without wasting any time. Xian gears up and follows his lead, doing his best to keep pace with the guy. They head out into a barren desert landscape where the weather is starting to turn sour. A hooded figure pushes forward through the haze, keeping his eyes locked on the path ahead. Xian realizes that his new powers are shielding him from the worst of the swirling desert winds. He watches the old man trek through the gale, wondering if the guy ever needs a break. 2 weeks of dead silence have him questioning if the old man is just grumpy or hiding something. The constant walking is starting to wear on him, and he doubts the old man has a destination. A massive insect bursts out of the sand, cutting their long trek through the desert short. Xian moves on instinct, slamming into the creature before it can even get a screech out. He is already exhausted from the journey and hates that they have to deal with this now. A sudden shift in the ground catches his attention, and he realizes they are in trouble. The bug is tougher than he expected, holding its ground despite the beating he just gave it. Glowing markers appear on the sand beneath his feet, signaling that this is not just a random encounter. He finds himself completely surrounded by a nest of these red-eyed monsters closing in on him. Xian braces for a fight, knowing that falling behind schedule will only make the old man angrier. He launches himself into the fray, kicking up a massive wall of dust as he commits. The swarm descends all at once, turning their path into a chaotic mess of teeth and claws. Xian shifts his focus back to the task, commanding the energy to detonate on cue. The ground erupts in a massive blast that sends debris flying across the entire desert. He tries to play it cool, acting like the sandstorm is just part of the job. The realization hits him that his mentor has completely vanished and left him all alone. Hostile creature crawls out from the dunes while Xian internally vents his frustration about loneliness. He starts sweating his previous comment, praying the old man did not actually hear his insult. His senses spike as he realizes he only has a 10-meter radius to detect incoming threats. He stays on high alert, constantly scanning the horizon for any sign of a magic beast. Suddenly, he stops dead in his tracks because the signal he just picked up feels different. Something massive is lurking beneath the surface that radiates a level of terror he has not felt. The ground tears open as a massive swarm of insectoid monsters floods the area at once. Xian is completely swamped by the sheer volume of enemies pouring out of the sand dunes. He calls out for the old man, but he is already starting to realize he is alone. The old man just watches the chaos from afar, clearly having planned for this exact moment. Xian catches himself in the middle of a panic and forces himself to stop acting helpless. He realizes the old man knew these monsters were here, and this is actually a test. He digs his heels in, deciding that no matter how many thousands appear, they are just bugs. Swinging with everything he has, he tries to carve a path through the suffocating insect wave. The pressure of the swarm pushes him to his limits as he fights to hold his ground. A massive monster looms right over him, but Xian refuses to back down from the fight. Xian is pinned to the desert floor and starts screaming that he regrets everything. He calls the swarm cowards for ganging up on him and demands a fair fight. Thousands of red-eyed insects close in from every direction and leave him cornered. A massive explosion of sand erupts as he attempts a desperate maneuver to break free. He uses the force of the blast to launch himself into the air on debris. Looking down from above, he realizes the desert floor is basically one giant anthill. He plans to reach high ground, thinking these things lack the ability to fight airborne. That theory falls apart instantly when he gets slammed out of the sky by impact. He finds himself stranded on a floating rock platform facing a massive insect below him. He cannot believe the sheer scale of the threat as he stares at the swarm. One of the creatures lets out a high-pitched screech and prepares to strike him down. The force of the attack sends him spiraling through the air toward the ground. He hits the sand hard and starts coughing up blood while struggling to breathe. Surrounded by shadows, he lies on the desert floor trying to catch his breath. Even through the pain, he manages to call out to the old man watching him. The old man sits nearby with his massive sword planted firmly into the sand. Xian pulls his face into a blood-stained grin that shows he's not done yet. He shouts at the swarm that he's going to survive this hellish ordeal. The old man moves in a blur of dust and calls Xian a dumbass for fighting. He notes that Xian could have used his rare ability for luxury but chose this instead. The old man stares ahead, noting that settling for a simple life was never an option. He scoffs at how everyone stays obsessed with surface-level illusions while ignoring the true history. He argues that an awakened is meant to evolve, not end up as some mass-produced soldier. A memory of a ruined wasteland flashes back, anchoring him to a deep, lingering regret. He still carries the weight of that failure every single day, unable to let it go. He recalls the century-old catastrophe that leveled his world in a single, blinding flash. The tragedy saw his entire city burn down, taking his friends and family with it. He admits that being unable to save his own daughter haunts him like a total failure. Turning his attention back to Xian, he acknowledges that the kid is cut from different cloth. He tells Xian to exploit his potential by constantly pushing past the brink of death. His expression hardens as he confirms the cold necessity of that brutal training path. He points out that Xian is currently evolving exactly because he is surviving that sandstorm. Xian leans into the manic energy, taunting the swarm with a wild, desperate scream. The insectoid monsters surge forward, blanketing the landscape in a wave of clicking armor. He begins forming a crude, high-pressure sand missile to handle the overwhelming incoming threat. The air begins to crackle as he prepares to launch the concentrated beam of energy. He forces gravity and wind into the attack to turn his simple move into something deadlier. The energy surges out with enough force to multiply his total power by 10 times. He roars at the monsters, convinced that he has finally pushed the fight to its finish. A massive shockwave tears through the battlefield as he declares their failure to kill him. A cloaked stranger watches from above and mocks the kid for getting so worked up. Burning projectiles rain down from the sky, turning the entire area into a death trap. The kid stands completely exposed in the middle of a massive, cratered wasteland. He turns his fury toward his mentor, screaming out for him to witness the chaos. Before he can finish his threat, a massive shadow slams into him with brutal force. He barely has time to process what hit him before the reality of the attack sinks in. A giant spider emerges from the silence and clamps its sharp limbs around him. He realizes he is covered in a black sludge that suggests something far worse than stealth. The truth hits him as he realizes this toxin is actively cutting off his mana supply. Even paralyzed, he refuses to back down and shouts his defiance at the unseen attackers. Dark energy tears through the air as he desperately fights to break free from his captors. He finally realizes the gravity of his situation as the last of his options vanish. He crashes into the depths of a dark tunnel and realizes he has fallen into an ant nest. A pale, writhing creature creeps closer while he remains completely unable to defend himself. He stares in horror as a swarm of giant larvae begins to surround his broken body. His hand twitches against the dirt as the massive grubs close the distance around him. The sharp mandibles of the lead larvae snap shut just inches from his face. He realizes his body is entirely unresponsive and he is about to be consumed alive. The black liquid drips down his skin as he finally begins to accept his fate. His vision blurs as his life starts to flash before his eyes in these final seconds. The larva on the ground lets out a series of high-pitched screeching noises. Suddenly, a massive fist slams into the dirt and sends shockwaves through the floor. An armored, insected creature emerges from the shadows and recoils from the sudden impact. Xian kneels in the center of the swarm and starts laughing through his heavy breathing. He screams that he refuses to die when his life has been nothing but unfair. Glowing marks flare to life across his arm as he turns his rage toward the ants. A violent blast of energy erupts and forces the surrounding creatures to brace themselves. Several armored insects are caught in the chaos and cry out in sudden distress. A massive dark predator lunges through the debris with its mandibles ready to strike. A localized explosion tears through the cavern walls and sends boulders flying everywhere. Xian holds his ground in the middle of the dust and swirling sharp debris. He realizes his rank has increased, the poison is gone, and his mana is overflowing. The mysterious markings on his arm shift and extend as he processes the sudden change. He notes that his current power is on an entirely different level than his previous rank. His eyes glow with a sharp light, yet he senses something is still fundamentally wrong. A colossal creature looms over him and points out that he has not taken a scratch. The monster smashes through the stone walls and sends Xian flying backward through the air. Xian struggles in the rubble, shocked that the beast is tearing through rock like paper. The creature continues its relentless, destructive charge through the cave with glowing purple eyes. Xian is pressed into the ground and realizes his attacks have not even left a dent. Xian claws at the dirt and realizes his current game plan is suicide. He knows brute force will not leave a scratch, so he needs a new angle fast. He locks eyes with the beast, hunting for a way to break that impossible hide. Instead of piercing or smashing, he starts looking for a way to peel it off. The creature screeches as he stops attacking and starts grappling with its defenses instead. He digs his fingers in, deciding he will just twist the armor right off its body. The monster lets out a high-pitched, frantic scream as he starts applying the real pressure. It retaliates by channeling a massive amount of energy, screeching back into the fight. They lock into a violent clash, pitting his raw strength against the creature's output. Caught in the massive backlash, Xian curses the beast for its insane defensive power. High-frequency waves tear through him, causing blood to leak from his eyes and ears. Trapped in a swirling vortex of energy, he gasps at the sheer force of the blowback. He realizes the monster was holding back a devastating trump card this entire time. With his eyes burning, he decides to double down and meet the beast head-on. They remain locked in a stalemate where only one of them is walking away alive. He grits his teeth through the pain and prepares to push even further. He screams in defiance, promising that this ends with one of them dead. His body starts to give out as the overwhelming energy discharge takes its toll. He collapses to the floor, barely conscious and confused as his limbs stop responding. He looks at his trembling hands, finally realizing that he has hit his absolute limit. Xian lays there, cursing his own body for failing him when he needs it most. Daoden catches him, though he does not hold back on calling the kid pathetic. He warns Xian that staying on this cold floor is a death sentence for a fool. Despite the blood blinding him, the kid manages a smirk and calls out to him. Daoden scoffs at the attitude but finally admits that the kid actually pulled it off. He confirms the wolf ant queen is way out of his league, yet Xian earned survival. Xian can barely process the praise because his eardrums are completely blown out from the fight. Realizing the kid cannot hear him, Daoden raises his voice to ensure the message lands. Xian is dragged through the rubble, wondering where exactly he's being hauled off to now. They stop in front of a strange, glowing sphere that is half buried in the debris. Xian stares at the pulsing object, completely caught off guard by its sudden appearance here. He asks the old man what he is supposed to be looking at right now. Daoden points at the orb, claiming it is a queen's egg and tastes like strawberries. Xian looks at the glowing thing and questions if the old man has actually lost his mind. He stares at the sphere, genuinely doubting that something like this could be edible at all. He asks if eating this will be as agonizing as the sand angler's gallbladder was. Daoden speaks, but Xian hears nothing and assumes the worst about the consequences of eating it. He decides it is worth the risk, figuring that death is not on the table today. He takes a bite, wondering what that promised strawberry flavor is supposed to taste like. The shock is instant because the damn thing is actually delicious. Xian realizes something is horribly wrong as his vision starts to blur and fade. Thorns begin erupting from his body as he collapses into the dirt in complete agony. This is the result of organ inversion, where the victim's own intestines twist inside them. Eating the queen ant's egg is essentially a death sentence for any normal human being. The poison forces Thorns to pierce every internal organ until the body completely gives out. He screams for answers while his body begins to violently spasm from the internal damage. The old man ignores the cries and tells him to toughen up if he wants survival. Xian can barely comprehend the cold indifference as he coughs up blood on the floor. He retches black bile while the red thorns continue to protrude from his own skin. Staring at his shaking, bloodied hands, he finally accepts the reality of his dire situation. The old man reflects on his life and realizes his trust was once again misplaced. Xian lies broken on the ground, finally seeing himself as nothing more than a pawn. He remains curled in the shadows, losing the battle against the lethal magical poison. With the boy out of the way, the old man turns his attention back toward the beast. He digs his hand into the creature's remains to harvest whatever value is left behind. The search continues deep inside the carcass to locate the creature's hidden power core. He finally pulls out a glowing, crystallized mana stone he extracted from the dead ant. This stone is far more potent than any common resource he has mined before today. He decides to harvest the rest of the ant remains since they might prove useful. The old man stands triumphant over his kill, clearly pleased with his haul of loot. The silver-haired man stares down at his fallen companion with a cold, detached gaze. Someone whispers that there is no other choice but to let the boy face his fate. He looms over the wounded figure while keeping his massive blade ready for another strike. The old man notes that time is running out for them to finish this little experiment. Deep within a hollow pit, Xian finally regains consciousness and questions if he is still alive. The elder greets him with a mocking grin, calling the boy an idiot for finally waking. A massive burst of light and debris erupts as Xian reacts to his surroundings in panic. The old man brushes off the wreckage, clearly annoyed by the kid kicking up so much dust. He watches the boy closely, noting a distinct change in his presence after the near-death experience. Xian remains trapped in the dark void, surrounded by golden projectiles while calling the elder a dumbass. Massive earth spikes close in around the old man as he tries to calm the boy down. Suspended in midair by crushing slabs of stone, Xian demands to know the reason for this. A violent explosion tears through the space as Xian screams, asking why he was targeted for death. The entire area is consumed by a blinding wave of force as the boy continues to scream. With his eyes burning in an ethereal light, Xian declares that he will never forgive this betrayal. Sharp crystalline spikes erupt from the shadows to tear apart the remains of their training ground. A heavy slab of dark stone collapses, demonstrating the sheer destructive weight behind the boy's outburst. Xian falls backward as the earth beneath him continues to tear itself apart from his raw power. He stands in the middle of the swirling dark energy, struggling to catch his breath from exhaustion. Xian stares forward with glowing eyes, still demanding answers as the old man sighs at him again. The old man stands in the dust and insults Xian for failing to think clearly about the egg. Xian realizes the guy took his full-force attack without even a scratch on his body. His mentor points out that killing a weak kid would never require a complex poisoning scheme. Xian has to admit that the old man actually makes a decent point here. The egg is a double-edged sword that tears apart internal organs while purging every impurity. It acts as a total body cleanse that creates room for massive amounts of new mana. Xian finally realizes his own energy reserves have effectively tripled or quadrupled since the training began. He breaks down, realizing the old man was not trying to destroy him after all. Xian lunges forward to tackle his mentor in a desperate, tearful apology for ever doubting him. The mentor is disgusted by the hug while Xian notices the egg even restored his hearing. Xian refuses to let go, stubbornly clinging to the man despite being told to back off. The old man finally softens his tone and accepts the gratitude from his student. Xian stays on the ground, relieved he did not accidentally kill the only person who can train him. Beneath the comfort, the mentor acknowledges that this whole stunt was an incredibly reckless gamble. He tosses Xian over his shoulder, telling him to stop acting soft and get moving again. Xian is confused about why they are suddenly rushing away from the training site. His mentor turns back with a sharp, predatory grin that signals something is deeply wrong. They are officially out of time and need to escape the area immediately. Xian realizes they have triggered something far worse than a simple training session. Out in the dunes, something is already tearing apart a fresh carcass as the sun sets. A massive shockwave tears through the landscape and sends boulders flying into the sky. The older man sprints through the desert while mocking his passenger for moving too slow. He keeps pushing their speed as payback for the kid sleeping for 4 whole days. The mentor stops mid-stride because something in the distance has caught his professional attention. The younger man prepares to complain but cuts himself off when he sees the horizon. His expression shifts instantly as the scale of the threat finally starts to sink in. A mountain-sized creature forces its way out of the earth right in front of them. The beast is 30 kilometers away, yet its size is impossible for any normal monster. The mentor identifies the creature as a mobile fortress known to everyone as Archelan. This B-rank turtle beast has armor that actually rivals the durability of A-rank threats. They confirm that people actually tame these titans to use them as living transportation vessels. The kid struggles to process that such massive creatures are being used in this world. It is a sobering realization that people have enough power to ride these colossal monsters. His mentor tells him to keep watching so he can learn how the world works. They drop down from the cliffside to intercept someone waiting on the desert floor. The mentor lands firmly between the kid and a mysterious man standing near a pillar. The stranger recognizes the mentor immediately while the kid demands to know who he is. The elder stares through his monocle as if he has been expecting this exact meeting. He acknowledges the mentor by name and confirms that they have a long, shared history. Deodan laughs at the old man's appearance and calls out to his acquaintance named Pavelsa. The old man is not impressed by their energy, calling out their age and unnatural stamina. He demands to know why they're here, prompting a quick excuse about dealing with local scavengers. The younger guy insults the elder for running away, but he gets called a brute in return. He's starting to realize that getting old does not actually mean these guys get any weaker. Tired of the back and forth, the elder whistles for a massive creature to rise up. The group stands tiny against a colossal, dark entity that just emerged from the desert sand. It is a massive scale of power that leaves the younger man completely speechless and stunned. They head toward the towering fossil structure as the elder tells them it is time to go. The younger man is clearly out of his depth and starting to show some real nerves. Standing right in front of a giant, unblinking eye, he decides it's safer to just stay quiet. The elder notices him for the first time and asks if he is some kind of subordinate. The man holding him just jokes that he's basically just picking up some literal trash today. The elder is visibly surprised that anyone would bother bringing a companion along on this trip. He makes a dry comment about how the world must be ending for that to happen. The kid is caught off guard as they move forward and catch sight of something massive. A sprawling city carved directly into the canyon walls suddenly comes into full view. It's the Mort clan, and the kid wants to know if they are all actually blood-related. The elder explains they are all descendants, but claims they are useless without their precious Archelan. One of the clan members overhears the trash talk and immediately challenges their right to judge. The elder does not back down, doubling down on the insult as they walk right past him. The white-haired man with the monocle shuts down the argument before it escalates any further. He stomps his foot hard, signaling it is time to move on to business. He sits down to get the trade started and invites his companion to inspect the goods. With a flick of his hand, he opens a dark portal right in front of them. A literal mountain of loot spills out onto the ground, including gold and monster remains. His companion is stunned by the sheer volume of death required to gather such a hoard. The kid asks if he is a mage, genuinely curious about where all that gear was hidden. The old man sighs, clearly tired of explaining basic concepts like subspace storage to a novice. Tension spikes as the kid talks back and the old man brandishes a razor-sharp claw. He ignores the kid to admire the quality of the loot, noting that every piece is flawless. He cuts the small talk short and demands to know the actual value of the haul. He toys with the idea of paying in mana stones before laughing off his own sarcasm. He presses the kid to name a fair price since mana stones are useless to him. The old man sets his terms and asks for a breastplate made from a wolf ant queen. He takes a sip from his drink while casually adding another item to his request. He wants a new subspace tool, leaving his companion looking completely drained by the demand. The kid questions why he needs more armor or storage when he is already well equipped. He reaches out and grabs the kid, clarifying that these items are not for himself. He holds the kid by the hood, making it clear this gear is intended for him instead. The old man pauses, his gaze sharpening as he suddenly realizes something important about the situation. Some observer is already sizing up the kid, wondering why someone like Deoten would care. The room goes quiet until someone shouts for Kaylee, drawing everyone's attention to the entrance. A heavy metal door marked with a strange symbol starts to signal an arrival. The old man and the kid wait in silence, both watching the door with guarded interest. When the door screeches open, the kid is clearly caught off guard by who walks through. A newcomer enters wearing heavy tactical gear and asks if she was the one being summoned. Kaylee stands in the doorway, and the kid is immediately distracted by how good she looks. The old man ignores the pleasantries and asks if she still has that subspace bracelet. Kaylee clarifies she has a custom gauntlet instead, proud of the work she put into it. The old man cuts her off and orders her to give that gauntlet to the kid. She's completely floored by the request, protesting that the item is way too precious. The old man just laughs it off, clearly impressed that she became such a skilled enchanter. He keeps pushing, praising her bloodline while firmly ushering her toward the next move. He tells her to quit complaining, get moving, and make sure Noelle crafts a new breastplate. Kaylee gives in and tells the kid to follow her so she can hand over the gear. The old man watches them walk off together, keeping a close eye on their dynamic. They head out into the urban plaza, moving away from the building toward their destination. Kaylee does not wait long to ask the kid exactly what his relationship is with that monster. The kid brushes it off, explaining they just met by chance and he is stuck following orders. Kaylee loses it, shocked that the old man is actually letting someone survive being dragged around. Xian looks at her and realizes she's carrying some heavy internal baggage. She clearly recognizes a shared trauma between them regarding that monster they both follow. She warns him that the old man is dangerous, while Xian already knows that full well. She stops in front of a stone wall, clearly proud of where she has led him. She reveals that this is her workshop, though it looks a bit more rugged than expected. Xian stands there stunned, trying to process exactly what he is looking at right now. He cannot believe the sheer amount of gear stored inside this cramped little space. She boasts that every piece here is a masterpiece she crafted outside of standard drops. She shows off an armored starfish frame made of adamantium with subspace and restoration features. Xian immediately lights up when he hears the item can actually repair itself. She explains that adding a fire attribute will turn him into an unstoppable killing machine. Xian hesitates to take such a valuable piece, but she insists it is per her grandfather's orders. She warns him it is a one-time setup that cannot be undone once it is locked. Things go sideways instantly as she refuses to actually let go of the item. They end up in a full-blown tug-of-war with both of them pulling as hard as possible. The situation turns into a violent mess as they struggle to control the gear. She drags him across the floor, screaming that she cannot give her creation to some nobody. Xian ignores her protests and refuses to let go, claiming the item is his now. A massive surge of pressure suddenly erupts in the room, forcing them both to freeze. The woman panics and considers backing down, but Xian realizes the pressure is not coming from her. The woman recognizes the signal and screams that the Archelon's cry means they have arrived. Xian is completely caught off guard and demands to know who exactly she is talking about. She confirms the threat is closing in on their position and there is no time left. Two men watch the situation unfold from inside the room while the tension begins to rise. The old man identifies the approaching group as persistent bastards who just will not leave them alone. A band of mounted scavengers emerges across the wasteland, signaling that the attack has finally started. They bolt up the stairs as the realization hits that the scavengers are coming for them. Xian knows these guys have been expanding their reach and he asks for the full story. They are the Black Shark Pirates, led by a D-rank psycho with a crew of Awakens scavengers. She warns that these people are not just looters but total psychos who kill everyone on sight. They reach the door and she shouts for her grandfather to prepare for the coming fight. Her panic is clear as she desperately calls out to him while Xian watches in total disbelief. The old man confirms he has already spotted the incoming threat from his position on the couch. She suggests they relocate the Archelon immediately before the pirates can close the distance between them. Instead of running, the old man decides it is finally time to stand their ground and fight. She starts to rally the troops, but the old man cuts her off with a sharp order. He makes it clear that their usual combatants are staying out of this particular engagement for now. She's stunned by his decision and cannot fathom why he is choosing to handle it alone. The old man turns his attention to Xian and calls him out to step up to the plate. He tells Xian that he is in charge of this defense, leaving the kid completely shocked. The old man hammers home that Xian took the loot and now has to pay the price. Xian is spiraling because he knows he has zero chance against a D-rank opponent. The old man does not care about the odds and flat out asks if he is scared. Every word is designed to crank up the pressure until Xian has no room to breathe. Xian stands in the middle of a desolate wasteland facing off against a massive stone beast. He knows he's being played and curses his own weakness for letting it happen. It is obvious now that the old man is just baiting him with these cheap tactical taunts. Xian forces himself to stop spiraling and focus on the immediate reality of his situation. He takes a deep breath to steady his mind and tune out the noise around him. The clock is ticking down because the enemy will arrive in less than 5 minutes. He needs to formulate a winning strategy while dwarfed by the massive stone creature above him. He readies his armored gauntlet and begins to channel his internal power into the frame. With the weapon equipped, he starts analyzing how to take down a much stronger awakened enemy. His focus sharpens as he stares down the prospect of fighting someone far above his rank. High above the battlefield, the two older men watch the entire setup unfold with cold detachment. One questions if it is truly safe to leave an E-rank kid to handle this alone. The white-haired man gives a brutal answer that the kid either wins this fight or dies. He believes that even a tiger cub can be killed by a dog if it is young. He figures that if the kid can survive and show some teeth, he might actually stand a chance. The two men shout down at the small figure, forcing Xian to look up at his final test. The old man bellows a final warning while his companion watches the chaos unfold. Someone hidden in the shadows struggles to keep their composure as the situation turns. The Black Shark Pirates arrive on the scene and ask if they should start looting. Their leader, Gawain, flatly refuses to take any prisoners alive during this raid. He orders his crew to dismember everyone and feed them to the hungry Archelons. The pirate crew surges forward at his command to initiate the brutal assault. The riders charge into the fray to make sure their reputation is feared today. They rush toward the sand, oblivious to the massive creature lurking just beneath them. A hooded figure suddenly launches into the air, staring down at the shifting desert floor. This warrior slams their fist into the ground with enough force to shatter the desert. Gawain freezes in total panic as the very foundation of the battlefield begins to collapse. The ground tears apart, forcing the captain to scream for his crew to retreat immediately. A massive fissure rips through the landscape and swallows the sand into the deep abyss. Gawain stares at the destruction in disbelief while his subordinate checks on his status. He demands to know if this was a trap, but Clang insists there were none. An attacker suddenly grabs Clang from the shadows and pulls her into a deadly hold. She realizes she has been compromised and panics as the enemy strikes from behind. Gawain lunges forward in a rage to stop the assailant from finishing his teammate off. A massive surge of energy erupts upon contact, sending jagged spikes tearing through the air. The captain watches in blood-spattered shock as the tide of the battle turns against him. Xian enters the fray, his presence shifting the battlefield into a swirling, chaotic mess. Dark tendrils lash out with lethal intent, leaving blood splattered across the desolate terrain. The younger fighter clears the blood from his eyes as a cold command forces him back into combat. Before he can recover, the hooded attacker lunges from behind with a blade crackling in red energy. A downward strike tears through the air, leaving a glowing trail in the barren dust. The attacker leaps again, driving a shockwave deep into the earth that rips the ground apart. The hooded man hesitates for a split second, clearly caught off guard by his target. He realizes his lethal blow did not land because the kid actually managed to block it. Desperate to gain the upper hand, he calls out to his partner Masamoto for backup. He slams back toward the ground, triggering a massive eruption of sand beneath his feet. The impact sends debris flying as he buries his weapon into the shifting, dusty earth. Frustration boils over as he demands to know what kind of cheap trick he is dealing with. A massive wall of sand explodes outward, obscuring the entire battlefield in a blinding haze. The attacker screams in disbelief, finally realizing he is fighting against literal sand manipulation. He lashes out at the kid, convinced that a few grains of sand cannot stop him. Energy crackles around his fist as he lunges straight into the center of the vortex. He screams for Masamoto to coordinate a pincer attack while he keeps the kid occupied. The two forces collide head-on, creating a blinding explosion that rocks the entire area. Xian stands firm in the aftermath, his gaze glowing with a cold, unsettling power. A sudden shout breaks his focus, forcing him to look up and acknowledge the new threat. Someone points out that he seems more concerned with killing a human than the actual fight. The elder sitting nearby warns him that the pirates are not human to begin with. Xian stares at the older man in disbelief, asking for confirmation on that claim. The elder explains that these guys do not kill for a reason, they just do it for fun. He reveals they have slaughtered over 200 people including women and helpless children. A boot lands right in a massive pool of fresh blood on the ground. Xian stands up amidst the swirling dust and questions if monsters like that are even human. The bandaged enemy loses his cool and starts cursing Xian out in a fit of rage. A menacing red glow flickers in the enemy's eyes as he prepares to strike back. Sharp stones materialize in the air around Xian, ready to be launched at his vitals. Xian blocks the incoming projectiles with a barrier while the enemy keeps on talking trash. The pirate sneers and calls him a piece of trash, clearly unimpressed by the defense. He promises to drag out Xian's death by feeding him to magic beasts piece by piece. The pirate threatens to make him hear his own family screaming, but Xian cuts him off. Xian pulls his sword and calmly asks if those are going to be his final words. The pirate's eye twitches, his patience completely gone after being interrupted like that. A silver-haired man watches from the sidelines, his own eyes glowing with a wicked intensity. Xian tightens his grip on his weapon, his expression hardening as he stares the pirate down. He looks the man in the eye and coldly calls him a piece of trash. The pirate just lets out a dry, twisted laugh, amused by the insult. Claying lies defeated in the dirt, the first sign of a brutal massacre. Asamoto follows his comrade into the dust, leaving the battlefield littered with broken fighters. The masked warrior surveys the wreckage and refuses to believe these men were bested by an amateur. He stares into the swirling vortex of sand, trying to calculate the true nature of his opponent's power. A massive spectral dragon rises from the grit, forcing the warrior to question exactly what he is facing. The warrior stops talking as his own energy begins to flare in burning red embers. He demands that the boy drop the illusions and reveal the real strength hidden beneath the sand. Shards of stone float in the air as the youth challenges his opponent to prove his status as an awakener. Enveloped in his own red energy, the warrior screams for the boy to stop hiding and fight. A violent cyclone of wind and sharp debris traps the young man, forcing him into a defensive stance. With his hands glowing from the strain of his power, the warrior baits him for another move. Predatory red light flares in the youth's eyes, signaling that the tide of the fight is turning. The boy suddenly blinks out of existence, leaving the warrior swinging at empty air. Panicked and searching the battlefield, the warrior realizes his target is no longer where he expected. A sharp, blade-like strike tears through the air as the boy reappears directly behind him. The warrior realizes too late that his own aggressive play has left him completely exposed. Boy stands motionless behind his target, noting that the man has finally entered his kill zone. A crushing blow lands, and the warrior finally understands he has been baited into a trap. Driven into the ground by a brutal kick, the warrior curses as the boy calls out his tactical failure. Looming over the fallen man, the youth warns that a single mistake is all it takes to lose everything. The bandaged fighter screams in pure fury, radiating a violent red energy that burns with lethal intent. He swears to make Xian pay for every single strike, specifically naming his fallen comrade Masamoto. A massive shockwave of red energy erupts from his body, tearing the very ground apart beneath him. The sheer force of the blast pulverizes the earth, turning the entire immediate area into a crater. He lunges forward through the smoke, chanting the names of his dead allies like a vengeful prayer. The relentless assault continues as he screams out more names, his rage driving every single movement forward. With his red eyes locked on target, he boasts that no ability can save Xian from his grip. His blood-stained hands slam into his opponent, sealing what he believes is the final death blow. He winds up a punch coated in dark energy, ready to end the fight with one crushing impact. The strike lands on nothing but air, leaving him stunned and searching for his target in confusion. He stands alone in the swirling sand, realizing the space where Xian was standing is now empty. Quick glance at his own hands reveals the truth, that Xian ditched his gauntlets to slip away. Frustrated, he buries a high-speed strike into the sand, cursing the kid for playing him like a rat. He lashes out with a powerful kick, sending a storm of debris flying toward the retreating figure. Wiping blood from his lip, he realizes he made a massive blunder by letting the boy escape. He studies his own wound, noticing that the force behind Xian's attacks has dropped significantly since the shift. He puts the pieces together, concluding that those heavy gauntlets were actually powering up the kid's strikes. He identifies the fighting style as a rare wind attribute, using the sand to boost his physical output. Moving with renewed focus, he prepares a vacuum force strike to catch the kid before he regains his footing. He stands composed and dangerous, ready to dismantle the rest of Xian's strategy now that he knows it. The cloaked fighter assumes Xian is finished now that he has lost his gauntlets. His opponent mocks the idea that a magic user could survive a close-range brawl. A cold, predatory grin spreads across the guy's face as he prepares his counter. A sudden, violent surge of sand erupts from the ground and impales the cloaked fighter. The guy is hoisted into the air, finally realizing the target was his exposed back. Xian smiles in the dust, knowing he finally baited the old man into a mistake. The pinned fighter curses, realizing he fell for the exact same trick twice today. Sudden realization hits him like a truck when he notices the missing gauntlets. It is supposed to be impossible for a mage to channel that much raw power. He starts to panic as the reality of the kid's true ability finally sinks in. The sheer destructive force of the sand spike pins the fighter down with brutal intensity. He stares in complete disbelief, unable to process what is happening to him right now. This ability does not just move sand, it commands the very ground beneath their feet. The world around them seems to warp as the environment turns into a lethal weapon. The fighter recoils in pure horror, realizing this kind of power should not even exist. A massive wave of sand crashes forward, dwarfing everything and everyone in its direct path. An old man watching from the sidelines is left stunned by the scale of power. He shakes in disbelief as he watches the kid turn the entire world into armor. This was a desperate play because a direct confrontation with a scavenger would be suicide. Xian played the role of an irregular perfectly, waiting for the one moment he could win. Xian is barely holding it together, his movements proving he learned these tactics on the fly. It is honestly terrifying that he pulled off a move that complex right in the middle of combat. The old man watching from the sidelines realizes Xian is way more dangerous than a standard trainee. He stands there under a gathering storm, clearly realizing the situation is spiraling out of control. He turns to Daoden and demands to know where he dug up such a freak of nature. The injured fighter stumbles through the debris, his arm clearly ruined after the exchange. He realizes how close he just came to death, knowing a single mistake would have ended him. Even through the pain, he expects his master to be impressed with the results of his gamble. Suddenly, the ground beneath him ruptures, sending a massive shockwave of dust and rock into the air. The landscape is left completely carved up, showing just how much force was packed into that single strike. Xian just stands there, completely caught off guard by the sudden escalation and the changing tide. The older man looms over the wreckage, absolutely livid at the display he just witnessed. The wounded fighter pleads for an explanation, desperate to understand what he did to trigger such rage. His master refuses to calm down, his face twisted in pure, unfiltered frustration at the outcome. He points to the swordsman Xian let live, finally revealing the source of the lethal mistake. The kid was so naive that he did not even notice the lethal ambush waiting for him right there. Another shockwave tears through the area as the master screams about the consequences of his mercy. Xian is left speechless, finally processing the reality of his own tactical blunder on the battlefield. The older man makes it clear that this level of hesitation is going to get him killed. He turns his back and orders Xian to retreat, leaving him alone in the swirling dust. The warning rings in his ears that he will not survive long with that soft mindset. The old master looks down, his weary gaze reflecting the harsh reality of their situation. Nearby, the woman watches the sky with a growing sense of unease and quiet alarm. A jagged, ornate blade sits nearby, a silent reminder of the lethal tools they actually use. Xian stares upward as the voice from above tells him to retreat while he still can. The desert wind continues to whip across the dunes, emphasizing how isolated and exposed they are. Xian stands still, staring out toward the hazy horizon while lost in his own thoughts. He finally breaks the silence by offering a soft, unexpected word of gratitude to the air. The elder explains that his people are just simple blacksmiths, totally unsuited for any real combat. He admits they're helpless against scavengers and acknowledges that Xian saved countless lives today. The old man keeps his kind demeanor, telling Xian that his performance was truly impressive. Xian just stands there for a moment, his heavy boots dug into the sand, processing the praise. The woman rushes over to embrace him, cheering for how he handled the pirates single-handedly. She tells him to ignore the old man's harsh standards because he was nothing short of heroic. Xian focuses inward, trying to reconcile his past failures with the man he's becoming today. He admits to himself that he purposely chose not to finish off Masamoto despite the risk. He realizes he actually just ignored the obvious threat, hoping the guy would just vanish forever. He knew perfectly well these enemies were pure evil and deserved to be taken out. Standing there in the vast desert, he accepts that he simply lacked the courage for murder. He looks at his own trembling, bloodied hand, finally admitting he prioritized his own conscience over duty. Xian stands in the desert and finally realizes the old man was right all along. He considers how many people like him the old man must have watched die before. Xian understands now that Daoden was just trying to protect him from that same fate. He realizes his mentor is just a guy who is terrible at showing his affection. A woman nearby watches them while Daoden stays focused on the horizon in total silence. Xian finds the current atmosphere between them completely bizarre compared to how they usually act. He remembers how Daoden struggled during their last fight instead of finishing the job properly. The woman tries to fix Xian up while noting that his current burden is heavy. Daoden feels guilty for being relieved while the kid suffers because of the older generation. Daoden breaks the tension by ordering Xian to get some food and clean himself up. Inside the shelter, Daoden sits alone with a book, lost in his own heavy thoughts. The quiet of the room is suddenly interrupted by a loud knocking at the door. Xian storms into the room, refusing to let the old man hide from him anymore. Daoden immediately mocks him, asking if the kid is here to quit and head home. Xian stands his ground and insists he is not as fragile as the old man thinks. Xian tries to dismiss the weight of his actions, but Daoden just listens with skepticism. Daoden points out the truth by noticing that the kid is still physically shaking. Daoden tells him that being bothered by taking a life is actually a good sign. He warns Xian that the guilt of killing someone will follow him forever regardless now. He tells the kid not to numb himself to that feeling because it never goes away. Daoden warns him that losing that sense of guilt is the first step toward becoming a monster. He insists that feeling the weight of his actions is the only thing keeping him human. The old man gives him one last chance to walk away from this path while he can. Xian slams his fist down and refuses to back down or be broken by the pressure. He insists that he can handle the consequences and tells the old man to stop worrying. He jokes that he has to stick around just to make sure the old man does not die alone. The elder studies him with a sharp, intense look that cuts through all the bravado. A small smirk finally breaks through his stern exterior as he calls the kid a brat. Xian mocks him for being dishonest about wanting the company, but the mood quickly shifts. The banter ends abruptly in a chaotic scramble as they start bickering over the living arrangements. Far away from the argument, a hammer smashes against hot metal in a display of raw power. Multiple blacksmiths work in perfect sync to forge the glowing steel under the intense heat. A specialist works with high-tech tools to refine the blade with an almost obsessive level of precision. The entire room erupts in a blinding pillar of energy that hums with an overwhelming magical presence. A woman watching the process notes that she has never seen so many masters gathered for one. The old man explains that such a massive effort is required just to stabilize the legendary blade. She questions how a simple weapon could possibly radiate that much power after days of work. He describes the sword Crayon as a masterpiece born entirely from a single man's twisted obsession. The woman struggles to comprehend the scale of the power radiating from the creation before them. The blacksmith confirms it holds the souls of millions of beasts, leaving no room for more magic. The smiths finally admit the blade feels more like a living creature than a weapon. When asked if a human could create such a thing, they only whisper the name Crayon. It turns out the legendary blacksmith and his masterpiece are known by the exact same name. The old man confirms the true identity of the creator is the infamous Kaylee. He tells her to save the questions for later because Xian is already preparing to leave. Daoden never sticks around long and he has likely finished his business here as well. The elder finds Daoden kneeling in a room filled with swirling energy and demands an explanation. Daoden claims he is just training, but the elder knows better than to believe that.